Shut up, Dad. Nobody cares about you. Calder didn't shout. He said it flat, like reading a weather report while stabbing noodles with a plastic fork. The TV bought on my senior discount Tuesday droned over a talk show audience clapping at nothing. My coffee went sour on my tongue. On the mantel, Alma's sunflower dress smile watched me like a gentle bailiff. I saw the bowl by the door, the truck key, the P.O. box key, and the shiny little one that still smelled like the bank's carpet, the safe deposit. I slid them into my pocket, the way a river swallows a skipped stone. The house sighed in its old bones. I didn't. All right, I said, voice neat as a folded napkin. I set the remote on the table instead of the Bible he'd parked it on. Then I walked to the door, took my coat from the hook, remembered he'd worn it last week and left gum wrappers in the pocket, and decided the chill might be kinder. The porch boards creaked, like old friends warning me not to look back. I didn't. I stepped into the afternoon that smelled like cut grass and distant laundry soap, and felt the weight of keys pull my jacket down just enough to make me stand straighter. I didn't slam the door. I closed a chapter, and I knew exactly whose name was on the next page, mine. The Ford coughed twice before agreeing to live again. I patted the dashboard like an old dog's ribcage. Easy, girl. We're both past warranty. She grumbled but moved. A faithful accomplice to a man escaping his own living room. I didn't have a plan, just a full tank, $27, and enough pride to power a small appliance. The radio caught a station playing something from the 70s, and I laughed when the chorus sang, "You can't go home again." Already tried, buddy, I said to the windshield. Halfway down Maple Creek Road, I passed the diner. Alma loved the one that still claimed best pie in 3 counties. The sign had lost one bulb, so it now promised Bez Pie in 3 counties. I figured that was truth in advertising. I parked, walked in, and sat at the counter. The waitress, same as ever Sharon, hair the color of week-old snow, smile that could forgive any cholesterol, squinted at me. Truman? Lord, you're still alive? Barely, I said. You still serving coffee strong enough to fix regrets? She poured me a cup and leaned close. Depends on how deep the regret is. About 6 feet, I said. She slapped my shoulder with a laugh that smelled like menthols and mercy. As I stirred sugar, I realized it was the first time in months someone had laughed with me. Not at me or worse, not at all. But as I sipped that bitter mercy in a chipped mug, I knew this wasn't just a drive to nowhere. Something in me had quietly decided, if they didn't need me there, maybe the world still needed me somewhere else. By sundown, I'd reached a stretch of road where even the billboards looked tired. One offered salvation, another offered tax help, and a third, faded and half-torn, just said, "Try pie." Sounded like divine guidance to me. I pulled into a roadside motel called Peaceful Pines. Not a single pine tree in sight, just 2 sad junipers and a cat that looked like it was halfway through retirement. The neon open sign buzzed like an electric bee. The receptionist was a teenage boy with the enthusiasm of a wet sponge. His name tag said Kyle. "Room for one?" he mumbled. "Unless you count my regrets," I said. He blinked. "That'll be 50, $2. The room smelled faintly of cleaning spray and distant heartbreak. The wallpaper was peeling at the corners, like it was trying to escape, too. I dropped my duffel on the bed and sat down. The springs complained louder than Calder ever did when asked to mow the lawn. I stared at the ceiling fan wobbling like a drunk philosopher and thought, so, this is what freedom smells like: lemon, disinfectant, and dust. Still, for the first time in years, no one told me to lower the volume, to stop humming, to eat slower. I could just be. So I whistled. Badly. On purpose. The cat from the parking lot slipped in under the door, stared at me like I owed rent, and curled up on my shoe. "Fine," I said. "You can stay, but no talking politics." That night, I fell asleep to the hum of the fan and the quiet truth that peace doesn't always look pretty. Sometimes, it just looks like an old man, a stray cat, and a room that finally doesn't echo with someone else's voice. Morning came in through the thin curtains, like a nosy neighbor. I woke up with a cat sprawled across my chest, purring like an idling lawnmower. "Good morning, sir," I said. "Hope you enjoyed the complimentary bed." He yawned, unimpressed. I looked around the room, still ugly, still mine. There was something healing about that. No photos of people pretending to love me. No unpaid bills with my name on them. Just me, instant coffee packets, and a cat that hadn't judged me yet. At the diner next door, a hand-painted sign read, "Breakfast served all day if you can handle it." Inside, the waitress wore an apron that said, "I've seen things." I believed her. "What'll it be, sweetheart?" she asked, pen poised like a dagger. "Something that goes easy on the heart and heavy on the soul," I said. "So, pancakes and bacon?" "Make it a double," I said, and she winked. As I waited, I noticed an older couple in the corner. They were arguing about crossword clues and syrup, and for some reason it made me smile. I realized I missed conversation, not correction. When the food came, I poured syrup like I was baptizing my new life. The cat had followed me, now sitting under my stool like a silent accomplice. "He'll take the bacon, I regret," I told the waitress. She actually brought him a small plate. "You running away or running towards something?" she asked softly while refilling my coffee. I thought for a moment. "Bit of both," I said. "Depends on the mile marker." She chuckled, scribbled something on my napkin, and walked off. It was a quote, "The road doesn't care who leaves, but it remembers who keeps going." And for the first time in a long while, I wanted to keep going, not to escape, but to arrive somewhere that finally felt like mine. I drove until the highway started whispering instead of roaring. The cat who I'd decided to call Harold, because he looked like one, sat on the passenger seat, tail flicking like a metronome to the rhythm of my thoughts. We stopped at a yard sale outside a faded farmhouse. An old lady in a pink tracksuit waved at me like she'd been waiting specifically for me. On her table sat a transistor radio, a cracked snow globe, and a sign that read, "Everything has a story. Some are cheaper than others." "How much for the radio?" I asked. $5, she said. "7 if you want it to work." "5's fine. I like surprises." Back in the truck, I turned the dial. It only played static and one gospel channel that faded in and out like an indecisive preacher. But it was my static, my own weather. No one interrupting me to tell me to change the station. At a rest stop, I parked facing a lake, so still it looked suspicious. I made myself a peanut butter sandwich with a plastic knife that bent like my patience. Harold tried to steal the crust. I let him win. There, on that wooden bench, I realized something wild. Silence wasn't scary anymore. I'd spent years filling it with apologies, explanations, and half-swallowed anger. But now, it was just quiet. Honest, unbothered quiet. I started humming again. Badly. On purpose. A fisherman nearby turned and scowled at me. "You're scaring the fish," he said. "Good," I said. "I'm trying to teach them boundaries." He blinked, then laughed so hard he dropped his sandwich in the water. And that's when it hit me. Maybe I hadn't lost my family after all. Maybe I'd just outgrown the version of them that couldn't hear me anymore. Still, I had no idea that silence I just bought for $5 was about to be interrupted by something louder than I could ever expect. 2 mornings later, I was halfway through a breakfast of burnt toast and optimism when someone knocked on my motel door. I froze mostly because the only people who ever knocked before were debt collectors or Jehovah's Witnesses, and both usually came in pairs. I opened the door, expecting one of them. Instead, there stood a delivery kid holding a brown envelope, breathing like he'd run a marathon in flip-flops. "You Truman Weller? Depends who's asking. Your son paid me $20 to deliver this. Said it's urgent." "Well, that's the first time he's ever used the word urgent without referring to pizza." He shrugged, handed me the envelope, and left. No goodbye, no tip, just the faint smell of fries. Inside was a letter. Not handwritten printed, of course. Calder wouldn't waste ink on sentiment. "Dad, I didn't mean what I said." "It was just heat of the moment. You're being dramatic. Come home. See." I stared at that short insult disguised as an apology and laughed so hard I spilled my instant coffee on Harold's tail. He gave me the kind of glare only cats and ex-wives can perfect. "Come home," I said aloud. "To what? A chair I'm not allowed to sit in? A voice I'm not allowed to raise?" I took the note, folded it carefully, and used it to wedge the motel window open for some fresh air. Worked better than any fan. Then, just for my own amusement, I wrote my reply on the motel's complimentary notepad. Dear Calder, I am home. You're the one who moved out. I didn't mail it. I just tucked it into my wallet next to Alma's photo, right where Faith usually goes. And as the wind came through that open window, I realized something funny. Maybe forgiveness doesn't mean opening the door again. Maybe it just means you stop checking if they're still knocking. By Saturday, I'd wandered into a small town that looked like it had been built entirely out of leftover kindness. The sign said, "Welcome to Brookhaven population. Give or take." I liked that level of honesty. At the edge of the park, I spotted a crowd of folks my age gathered around folding tables covered in deviled eggs, potato salad, and gossip. A hand-painted banner read, "Community picnic everyone! Welcome, even Larry." I had no idea who Larry was, but I admired his resilience. A woman in a floppy hat waved me over. "You lost, sweetheart?" "Probably," I said, "but at least I'm well fed while doing it." They made room for me like I'd been expected all along. Someone handed me a paper plate and a cup of homemade lemonade strong enough to remove car paint. Harold the cat appeared out of nowhere, charming a cluster of widows by stealing a meatball. One of them clapped. "Smart boy. He knows what's good." "Runs in the family," I said. They laughed, bless their lonely hearts. As I sat there, eating food that hadn't come from a microwave, I realized something deep and ridiculous. Maybe you can't choose your blood family, but you can definitely recruit replacements with better recipes. An old man named Floyd played harmonica like it was a full-time job. Between songs, he nudged me. "You traveling friend?" "Running away," I admitted. He squinted. "You sure it's not running toward?" That hit harder than the lemonade. I just smiled and said, "Depends if there's pie at the finish line." He slapped my back. "Then you're already halfway there." As the sun dipped behind the oaks, I looked around at all those strangers laughing, passing potato salad, and pretending life wasn't complicated. And for the first time since I'd left home, I didn't feel like a man escaping anything. I felt like someone finally arriving to a world that didn't require an apology to let him stay. By the next morning, Harold and I were local celebrities. Someone had posted our picture on the Brookhaven Facebook page. "Mysterious gentleman and his dignified cat brighten up our picnic." I didn't know which part of that was funnier, gentleman or dignified cat. Harold had spent most of the event stealing chicken wings and sitting on the dessert table like he owned stock in it. When I went into town for coffee, the barista grinned. "You're the cat guy, right?" "Depends," I said. "If he owes taxes, I've never seen him before." She laughed, handed me a free muffin, and pointed at a bulletin board. "They're looking for someone to help at the community center. Fixing shelves, repainting walls. You look like the type who knows his way around a hammer. Lady, I've raised a teenage son. I know how to fix anything broken." So I went. The place was dusty, tired, and full of people pretending not to be lonely. Felt like home. I started patching walls, tightening screws, even fixed a stubborn door that hadn't shut properly since the Bush administration. When it finally clicked into place, the small crowd of retirees cheered like I'd invented electricity. That night, as I sat outside the motel, Harold on my lap, I realized I hadn't thought about Calder all day. Not once. It scared me a little and then it didn't. I whispered to the cat, "You think he's noticed I'm gone?" Harold blinked, unimpressed. "Yeah, me neither." Then a figure approached Floyd, the harmonica guy. "Town meeting tonight," he said. "They're giving you something." "Me? What for?" He grinned. "For showing up." Turns out the mayor, a woman with more energy than common sense, handed me a small plaque that read, "To Truman Weller, for reminding us that coming home can mean starting over." They clapped. I tried to look humble. Harold yawned dramatically. And right there, in a town I hadn't planned to find, surrounded by people who didn't owe me love but gave it anyway, I finally laughed the deep, stupid, full-bellied kind. And I thought, maybe walking away wasn't the end of my story at all. Maybe it was just the first time I walked toward the punchline. 3 weeks into my new life, I'd become a permanent fixture of Brookhaven half-handyman, half-unpaid comedian. Every morning, I'd fix something at the community center, trade sarcasm for pie at the diner, and discuss philosophy with Harold. who mostly contributed by sleeping through it. Then one afternoon, while I was repainting the fence outside Peaceful Pines, still no pines, my phone buzzed. The screen said, Calder. My stomach did a small, reluctant backflip. I hadn't heard his voice since the letter. I let it ring 3 times before picking up. Dad? His voice cracked like a kid's, not a man's. Where are you? Alive, I said, against all odds. I didn't think you'd actually leave. Well, son, when someone yells shut up and disappear, a man's gotta make a good first impression. Silence. Then softly, Mom would have wanted us to fix this. I looked at the clouds, wondering if Alma was eavesdropping. Your mother would have wanted you to stop microwaving fish in the house too, yet here we are. He chuckled the first sound that didn't sting. I miss you, Dad. Do you? Or do you miss your free lawn care? Another laugh. Weaker this time. Both. We talked not long, not perfect, but real. He said he was sorry again, and this time, I almost believed it. He asked if he could visit. Maybe, I said. But fair warning, there's a cat here with strong opinions about guests. When the call ended, I just sat there, brush still in hand, paint dripping onto my shoe. Harold looked up at me as if to say, See? Even stubborn kittens find their way home. I smiled. Yeah, but I'm not rushing it. A man needs to finish his fence before rebuilding bridges. And for the first time in my life, I realized that forgiving doesn't always mean returning. Sometimes it just means you stop driving away. A week later, Calder called again, this time to announce, not to ask. I'm driving down tomorrow, Dad, just for the afternoon. I nearly dropped my screwdriver. Well, I'll alert the town. Maybe they'll throw you a parade, 2 cars and a goat. He sighed, half laughing. Just don't make it harder than it has to be, okay? Son, life's been hard since Disco died. The next day, his car pulled up to the motel parking lot. He stepped out looking exactly the same except older, somehow, in the way guilt makes a man sag. I was sitting outside in a lawn chair that squeaked like it was gossiping. Harold sat beside me, judging the moment like a furry therapist. Calder cleared his throat. Nice cat. He's the emotional support I applied for but didn't deserve. He smiled. It was awkward, fragile, but real. He handed me a grocery bag inside. I found my old flannel, a jar of Alma's peach preserves, and my favorite mug, World's Okayest Dad. The handle was cracked. It felt right. I found these when I cleaned the garage, he said. Didn't think you'd want them, but Mom would have, you know. Yeah, I said softly. She would have. We sat on the curb, drinking motel coffee, saying more with silence than words could manage. At one point, Harold jumped onto Calder's lap. He froze like he was handling radioactive material. Well, I said, he doesn't usually like people who make me cry, so that's a good sign. Calder laughed through his nose. Guess I earned that. Guess you did. We didn't fix everything that day, but we didn't break anything new either. That for us was progress. When he finally stood to leave, he said, You're really happy here, huh? I looked around the crooked motel sign, the half-painted fence, the stray cat with more attitude than sense. Yeah, I said. It's funny. Turns out, home was never the house. It was just the moment no one's telling me to leave. And as his car disappeared down the road, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, not anger, not sadness, but peace wrapped in laughter. The kind that sounds suspiciously like forgiveness wearing work boots. A few mornings after Calder's visit, I woke up to the sound of someone knocking on my motel door again, apparently. I'd become Brookhaven's most sought-after retiree. It was the mayor, wearing a visor, carrying a clipboard, and radiating the kind of energy you only get from pure caffeine or chaos. Mr. Weller, she said, we've got a situation at the community hall. The air conditioner's possessed. Ma'am, if it's talking back, it might just be lonely, I said, pulling on my boots. Turns out it wasn't possessed, just clogged with bird feathers. I fixed it with duct tape, sarcasm, and a prayer. When it started humming again, the mayor clapped. You're officially the town's hero. Perfect, I said. Does that come with dental or just applause? Word spread fast. Suddenly I was fixing fences, rewiring lamps, and somehow officiating a wedding between two people in their 70s who couldn't agree on who forgot their vows first. The bride whispered, "You think we're crazy?" "Ma'am," I said, "I ran away from my own family, adopted a cat, and now I'm blessing strangers with ring pops. You're the sane ones." They laughed so hard the groom dropped the ring. It rolled straight into Harold's food bowl. We called that divine intervention. That night, sitting outside with the newlyweds, I watched the fireflies rise from the grass like quiet applause from the earth itself, and something inside me loosened the tightness that had lived under my ribs since Alma passed, since Calder's words, since all the times I'd swallowed my voice to keep peace in a home that had none. I realized this little town didn't fix me. It just heard me, and that was enough. I raised my coffee mug to the stars. "To Harold," I said. "My life coach with fur." He sneezed, completely ruining the moment. But that was fine, because peace, I'd learned, doesn't always look poetic. Sometimes it just looks like duct tape, fireflies, and a cat with no respect for timing. A month later, I took a morning walk through Brookhaven's little park, the one with benches that groaned louder than my knees. The air smelled like dew and pancakes. Harold trotted beside me like a four-legged celebrity on patrol. That's when I noticed a new wooden bench near the pond, with a small brass plate gleaming in the sunlight. It read, "For Alma Weller, whose laughter still echoes by the water." My breath caught. The mayor must have done it. I sat down slowly, running my fingers over her name. The wood was warm, like it remembered her somehow. "Would you look at that, Alma?" I whispered. They finally spelled our last name right. Harold jumped onto the bench, curling up beside me. For a while, we just listened, ducks arguing, kids laughing, someone playing a badly tuned guitar nearby. It was chaos. Beautiful, ordinary chaos, the kind Alma always loved. I told her everything, about Calder's visit, about the wedding, about how the townsfolk now called me Mr. Fix It with Attitude. I even confessed that I'd eaten pie for dinner 3 nights in a row. "You'd have scolded me for that," I said. "But you'd have taken a bite, too." The wind stirred, gentle but certain, like a woman sighing from another room. For a moment, I swear it smelled faintly of her old perfume, lilac and something stubbornly kind. And then, because I couldn't help myself, I said, "You know, Alma, I think I finally understand what you meant by home follows you if you let it." Harold stretched, blinked at the horizon, and meowed perfectly timed, as if to say, "She told you so." I laughed out loud, drawing strange looks from 2 joggers. "Don't mind me," I said, "just having a family meeting." And as I sat there, the world didn't feel empty anymore. It just felt full of laughter, fur, and the kind of love that doesn't leave, even when you do. Somewhere between fixing leaky faucets and hosting Thursday bingo, I realized people had stopped calling me poor old Truman. Now it was just Truman, the guy with the cat and the toolbox. A promotion, if you ask me. The change hit me one afternoon at the diner. I walked in, expecting my usual corner seat, but Sharon, the waitress, shouted, "Hey, Truman! You're late! The mayor's trying to steal your booth!" I looked over, and sure enough, there she was, elbows deep in a slice of lemon meringue. "Don't make me call the police," I said. "Bench theft's still a crime." The whole diner laughed, not at me, but with me. That distinction used to be a luxury. Now it was breakfast. Later, Floyd came by the community center to help me hang a new sign out front. Brookhaven Hall, fixed by Truman and Amp. Friends, mostly Truman. He'd added the mostly himself. I let it stay. As we worked, Floyd said, "You know what I like about you, Truman? You left home and somehow found one bigger." I chuckled. "Yeah, and this one doesn't yell when I burn toast." When I got back to the motel, Harold was sitting by the window, tail twitching, watching a butterfly like it owed him money. I plopped into my chair and said, "You realize, Harold? We're locals now. They even gave us credit at the diner." He yawned the feline equivalent of, "Don't get sentimental." But that night, as I watched the sunset stretch gold across the cracked motel walls, I thought maybe this is what winning looks like when you stop keeping score. No trophies, no applause. Just peace, earned one laugh at a time. And then my phone buzzed a picture from Calder, him in his backyard, fixing the fence I'd always meant to repair. The caption read, "Took a while, but I got it." I smiled, shaking my head. "Yeah, son," I murmured. "So did I. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like someone who'd been left behind. I felt like someone who'd simply arrived late, but exactly on time for his own life." By autumn, I couldn't walk down Main Street without someone honking, waving, or trying to hand me a casserole. Brookhaven had that small town law. Feed the man who fixes things, or he might retire again. The mayor asked if I'd host the town's fall festival. "You're our most reliable resident," she said. "Ma'am," I told her, "I once lost a cat in my own room." "Yes," she replied. "And yet somehow you found an entire community. That's leadership." So, I did it. I put on my best flannel, ironically, the same one Calder had returned, and stood on a tiny stage between a pumpkin display and a dunk tank that looked suspiciously unsafe. My speech wasn't long. I never liked long goodbyes. "Folks," I said, "when I first drove through here, I was just looking for peace and cheap coffee. Turns out, both were easier to find than I thought. You didn't just welcome me, you adopted me, cat included. I'd say I'm grateful, but I think the word you're looking for is stuck with me." The crowd laughed, clapped, and someone yelled, "We'll take Harold too." "Good luck," I said. "He's unionized." That night, as lanterns floated over the pond like little borrowed stars, I saw families laughing, kids chasing each other, and old friends sharing pie-like communion. It hit me. I wasn't watching life from the sidelines anymore, I was part of it again. I thought about Alma, about Calder, about all the years I'd tried to hold a family together with duct tape and politeness. Maybe you can't fix people like you fix hinges, but you can love them from wherever you are quietly, kindly, without expecting applause. Harold jumped into my lap, startling me out of my thoughts. Someone nearby handed me a slice of pie. "You hosting again next year, Truman?" I grinned. "Only if there's hazard pay." And as laughter rolled across the park, I realized something rare and wonderful. The world hadn't gotten smaller since I left home. It had just finally made room for me. Winter came quietly to Brookhaven, soft as a secret. The morning smelled of wood smoke and fresh bread from the bakery next door. Life had slowed into something steady, no shouting, no apologies, just the gentle rhythm of enough. One evening, as I cleaned out my old duffel bag, I found them the same keys I'd pocketed the day I left. The truck key, the P.O. box key, and the little brass one that once opened my son's house. I turned it over in my hand for a long while. It was worn smooth, like it had been waiting for permission to rest. Harold sat on the table, watching me with those judgmental green eyes. "You're right," I said. "Some doors don't need locking, or unlocking." So I walked down to the lake, Alma's bench shining faintly under the moon, and tossed that little brass key into the water. It landed with a sound so soft it could have been forgiveness. The ripples spread, wider and wider, until the surface stilled again. I felt something inside me settle too. Not an ending, more like a sigh that had waited half a lifetime to exhale. "Guess that's it, Alma," I murmured. "He's got his house. I've got mine. And you've got the best seat in town." The wind rustled through the reeds like applause. Harold meowed, probably demanding dinner, and I laughed through the lump in my throat. On the walk back, the town lights glowed warm against the dark. The diner, the hall, the faces I now called friends. And I realized I didn't disappear that day I drove off. I just finally showed up for myself. I opened my motel door home, ridiculous and real, and set down my jacket. Harold jumped onto the bed like a king, reclaiming his throne. "All right, partner," I said. "Tomorrow we live again." He blinked once, unimpressed, and curled up to sleep. And as I turned off the light, I smiled to the quiet, to the ghosts, to the life that somehow waited for me to arrive late but arrive all the same. Because sometimes the loudest revenge is peace. Thank you for watching, my friends. Life has a strange way of testing us, but peace, is the sweetest revenge of all. If this story touched your heart, make sure to subscribe to the Old Man Stories, where every tale reminds us that dignity never gets old. In the comments, tell me where you're watching from and how old you are. I read them all, and every story you share means more than you think. Until next time, stay kind, stay strong, and remember, silence often says what words cannot.